I just wanted to start with, of course, the cartoon. I just like this cartoon because this cartoon reminded me that if I don't have a plan, I just sort of wing it. And what I know for myself is, again, a plan ensures that success. And I'll have to say, I've been in business for 12 years now. Each year, we have a strategic plan, so a 3-year plan, and each year we have a business plan. And that business plan is dog-eared, it's referred to often, and you know what that plan has? That plan has measures. And it's the measures that keep us honest. And I'll have to say, every year, we always build stretch targets into our plan. And although we may not hit the stretch target, every year we've grown ourselves and we've landed our targets and or come very close to our targets. So those targets, those measures, I believe, are what keeps our plans alive and vibrant. So hopefully I can share that with you as we work through the morning. And one of the things that you'll come out of this is some measures that, from a people perspective, that will help you actually keep your plan alive and actually get the attention that it deserves within your organization. So the agenda for the morning is I am going to, as I mentioned, walk you through a process and then put you to work. And so we're going to start with the process for strategic planning, and then we're going to talk about the scorecard. After we talk about the scorecard, we're going to formulate, what strategic goals look like based on your scorecard. And then once you've got your goals in place, we're going to talk about how do you set metrics and analytics to make sure that you're measuring your goals. We'll take a break, and then we've got a workbook, and we're actually going to start working through then a workbook at your table that will allow you to start formulating that HR plan. So then when you take it back, we'll also talk about some tips on what's important as you take it back to get that ownership of the leadership team back at the office, and then to move your plan forward. Have a little bit of time for Q&A, and we'll be out of here by noon. So that's the plan, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'd like to just share our tables to get ourselves warmed up and talking about the subject, is to share a little bit. So at your table, and we've got some small tables here. It would really be beneficial if you've only got a couple at your table to join other tables, because what I'm hoping you'll do today is get synergies from each other. You're going to be working your own plan, but you need ideas from other people that will help you think outside the box, and I think it'll help you move your plan that much quicker. So if you're maybe here, if you want to join other tables, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I don't know if you want to work at 3, if that's fine, but here for sure would be great. And then you guys can decide later whether or not you want to divide up and maybe join another table as you actually start working on your plans. But what I'd like you to do is at your table, if you can just share with your name, your position, your organization, and talk a little bit about HR strategic plan. Who is accountable for the people planning in your organization, and what are you measuring from a people perspective? So do a little bit of sharing at your table, and I'll check in with you in a couple of minutes. Okay, if I can just check in with everybody. What I would be really interested in hearing from the tables is I would be interested in hearing who is doing the HR planning in the organization, and I would really like to capture what are you measuring. So can we start here? Who's doing the planning and what are you measuring?
Everything.
You measure everything.
Yeah, we have a research department. Right?
Oh, okay.
So, we're a mental health agency. So we literally measure everything, not just in HR, but because we have that such prominence in our agency, we also measure everything in HR, from exits to like the health of the team leaders, in terms of how many staff they're retaining and what we can do better. We measure number of onboardings that we do. We measure everything.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, just to add anything. I'm just curious to hear what people are measuring. Okay.
The largest measure for us right now is because we are a not-for-profit organization and our base are volunteers. The biggest measure for us is measuring man hours, staff hours versus our volunteer hours, and
Okay.
we always have to make sure that we have more volunteer hours.
Sure. Who's doing the strategic plan at the table? What I would be interested in hearing that. Who's doing it?
We've been measuring kind of where our staff are, right? We have a number of them that we're like, okay, who's working from home, who's doing vacations and sick times and all of that, and just doing reports from the whole perspective of an organization of 140 people. How many hours are we actually putting into our work days?
Oh, okay. So you're measuring hours. Okay. All right. And can I just ask, who's doing it? What's the consensus? Who's doing this HR strategic planning? What level? Where in the organization does that land as far as an accountability?
With our HR manager and the HR director.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. What about at this table here? Was it the same? HR manager. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. Okay.
I'm also with a nonprofit, Bacova, and we have a research department as well, but I would say our director of HR is responsible for the strategic planning piece, but with support from the research department on collecting and analyzing and reporting all of the data.
Right.
One thing we just started measuring right now because we have a new HR system coming in the next year, but we've started mapping out like the entire hiring process and measuring how long each stage of the process takes to see if the new system is going to help improve that process more.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, great. Back here. So who's accountable and what are you measuring?
We don't have a strategic plan. We
So
don't have an HR strategic plan.
You have an HR strategic plan?
No,
okay.
we do not.
Oh, you do not?
No. So,
yeah. Does the organization have a strategic plan?
We're developing it.
Okay,
so
good.
there's been quite a bit of leadership change within our organization, so we are developing one.
Okay.
We have spent quite a bit of time lately, though, with employee engagement, trying to figure out where we are, getting some benchmarks and baseline measures.
Okay, great. So you're measuring employee engagement?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
And satisfaction.
Okay.
So let's do it.
Okay.
So my organization has over 5,000 team members.
5,000.
Over 5,000. And so aside from the usual measurement of engagement and recruitment numbers, et cetera, one of the things that we're actually really focusing on this year is team member advocacy. So we're ATB Financial. And so team member advocacy ties to, I'm a team member, I'm also a customer, right? And how much or to what level are our team members promoting the company, promoting the services, promoting their workspace, et cetera.
So you're measuring that?
Yes, team member advocacy.
Okay. Yeah. Curious, how are you measuring that?
I don't know. we have a people intelligence team that there's a huge team around it.
Okay, all right, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for your honesty. Okay, great. Thank you.
Ours also is engagement, and we're measuring it with a lot of surveys. And the big change that I've made is I'm tired of surveys that are asking questions that we can't change.
Right.
Because that's when the engagement goes down. Don't ask if they're happy with their salary. We're not for profit. They're probably not. And we're not going to change it. So we're asking questions that we can make changes on and tweak and stuff like that. So yeah, ours, because we've had such a problem with turnover. So that's we see the turnover. So that's what we're measuring. But then also what can we do to reduce turnover? And it's engagement and it's just making people happy. So we're doing the surveys, but with things that we can actually do to.
So it's very intentional.
Yes.
Very intentional.
And that's the biggest thing. I'm tired of the asking questions that we're not going to utilize.
Okay. So if you take anything, thank you for sharing. If you take anything away from today, think about that. If you're measuring, make sure you're intentional on your measurement and know why you're measuring it, right? So if you take anything away at all today, take that. And the way you'll make sure that it's intentional is to set clear goals, right? That are linked to your strategy. So it's all fits, right? And then focus on those measurements that are going to land your goal to drive your strategy. So be very intentional, and I like that. So thank you for sharing. Who's responsible for your HR strategic planning? Okay, great. Thank you. So put up by a show of hands, how many in the room have a organizational strategic plan? Most. Great. And then how many here have an HR defined strategic plan? Okay. And that's pretty typical, but you know what the nice thing is? The majority, everybody, I think I saw their hands up saying that you have an organizational strategic plan, because that's your starting point, right? So if you don't have that, it's hard to put together an HR strategic plan, right? So everybody already is good as they get out the gate, because we're going to talk about the alignment of your HR strategic plan to your business plan, right? So you're in a good starting point. So that's all good. I just am curious though, like this is going to be quite interactive. I want to make sure we nail it though, with respect to what do you want from the session. So can I just, if anybody has something that they don't want to leave here without getting, can you share that with me to make sure that we land it? So does anybody have something burning that they really want to take from this session? You've seen the agenda, hopefully we will land, but can you just share with me, what do you really want out of the session? Yes. Okay. Just over to here, I'd like leading measures. So rather than what's happened in the past versus what's going to happen in the future. So looking out. Okay. All right, good. That might stretch us. We got to think about that. All right. So everybody in the room, think about that as you work today, right? Because I think that is a really good point. A lot of times, I think we're getting better. Many organizations are getting better at measuring. And when we do measure, we tend to measure lagging. We do. Yeah. So we have to stretch ourselves to look at those leading ones. Okay. So leading measures. Anything else? What do you want to take from? Yes. Like how you manage when you get with change and things that and you've called out sort of your goals, but then you've got the everyday. Yeah. All right. So realizing stretch goals. When you have to manage the day to day. Okay, all right. Realizing stretch goals when the unexpected happens, right? Okay. All right. We have our work cut out for it. Yes.
I'm not an HR person, I'm an accountant, and I've been asked to coming up with compensation plans. We know compensation bonus structure. So of course
I think very financial, and I need to not just do that, but also convince my owner that we need to encompass some of these things as well.
Okay. So we will talk about that through the balance scorecard. Mm-hmm. So the balance scorecard is going to be your ticket on that one. Okay. We'll talk balance scorecard in HR language, okay? So the balanced scorecard is your answer to that, okay? So it's a rounded plan, right? It's not just about one thing. And that is the scorecard. That's your scorecard, yeah. Which we'll talk about, for sure. And we're really going to try to learn some of these things as well. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, I think we need to get to work then. So what I really want you to do is think about I have to be honest with you in the room here, all the answers will not come from me today. All the answers will not come from me. We need to work together. So if you want something out of today's session, work your group, right? So if you've got a burning thing, we have lots of time to work today, so work your group. Find your answers, okay? All right, so I do, though, want, as I said, talk about a process, because your strategic plan, your people plan, will only be good as the process that you develop and or work through, right? I am a very strong believer in a strong process. And whether, as I said, you're doing your strategic plan, your business plan, your HR plan, or your finance plan, whatever you're doing, follow the same process. And what that's going to be is, first of all, think in terms of alignment with the business plan. What do you need to do to get aligned as you start your planning process? What do you have to do the analysis, to figure out where the heck do I get focused in my plan, right? So that's that analysis, that situational analysis, which we include a situational assessment. We like to do an environmental scan, which is we'll talk about the pest, and your SWOT analysis. Really, really important. So what does that look like? And how do you do it from a people perspective? After you've done that, you're going to sit back, you're going to take a look at what you've got, and you're going to say, okay, based on what I've heard, what are our strategic goals from a people perspective? You're going to look 3 years out and come up with those strategic goals. And then you're going to go through a process that will allow you to come up with some metrics and analysis to measure whether or not you're landing your goals and objectives. So that's the process for strategic planning. It is not rocket science. It's not, honestly. And so, but it is a step-by-step that you need to do, and you need to be disciplined in doing it. I'll have to share with you my story this year. We usually do our strategic and business planning, our people planning. We tend to do that in November and December. I got sick this year, and it didn't happen. It did not happen. So I went into the new year without my plan, and so I'm feeling behind. I'm feeling nervous. And I just need to get my goals and objectives set for this year, because I know that if I don't, we're not going to grow and be successful the way I need a plan to be golden. And everybody on my team knows that. So they've seen us stressed down lately. And so my inclination and because I'm feeling stressed is, okay, I think I got enough just to put it together, right? And I know I can't do that. I've got to follow the process if I'm going to get a good plan that will actually drive us forward. So even though I'm running late, I'm following the process. So we're doing our planning now, and we'll roll it out to our team in mid-February. We usually roll it out by mid-January. We're going to be a month late, a whole month late, but I'm going to follow the process because I know how important it is. So we've started our meetings. We've gone through this stage now. We did the alignment, because we've got a 3-year plan. We did our analysis. Just before Christmas, just after Christmas. So we've completed the analysis. We are now at this stage here. And so it's a very thoughtful process, and I really encourage you to do that, because your plan will just be that much more better. And when you look back in a year, you're going to be amazed on how you've propelled yourself forward, because you've done the discipline. So we're going to talk with respect to the alignment with the business plan. The importance of checking back in and revisiting your mission, your vision, your values, and the organizational strategic plan. Those are all the things you need to do in order to make sure that your people plan, your HR plan is aligned with the business plan. So you do need to go through all of those and think in terms of, how does my people plan fit in under my mission, vision, values, and the organizational strategic plan? So I want you to talk at your table, and I want you to pull out your workbooks at this point because there is a section in there. Because what I'd like you to do at the end of this session to have the beginnings of your HR strategic plan. So the very first thing in your workbook is that exercise where we talk about our mission and vision and our organizational strategy. So discuss at your tables your mission, vision, and values, and identify and talk about. I want you to talk in terms of, are they actual helpful in developing your people plan? Like, can you see the link? Can you understand the importance of having those, what I like to call guiding principles in developing your people plan? So have that conversation and think about the questions in your workbook. And the other thing I want to say, everybody in the room said they had an organizational strategic plan. So what I want you to do is talk about, do you actually have it? Like, can you actually go and put your hands on it and get it and grab it and read it and understand it? So do you have this information? If you don't, how might you obtain it? So have that conversation and start addressing that first issue in your workbook, and I'm going to check back with you in a couple of minutes. I'll give you more than a couple of minutes, but start having that important conversation about your mission, vision, values, and that in alignment with your organizational strategy, and refer to your workbook. Because I'm hoping we'll get some good thinking here. So if I look at your workbook, and I'm saying, okay, align with your business plan, your vision, mission, value, and culture. What messages or guidance do these strategic statements provide you in developing your HR strategic plan? And as you have your discussion here, what were some of the things you were hearing, and can anybody give me an example? Can anybody give me an example of how your mission, vision, or values will drive your people plan? Anybody? Take a chance? Okay.
If your employees don't know what your mission and vision is, and a lot of times if you ask an employee what our mission and vision are, they don't know. Okay. They can't recite it. So if employees don't know what they're working towards, it's really hard for them to follow a plan.
Right, and it's also hard for them to focus, to be accountable, because they're not sure what's important, right? So that is the importance of your mission, vision, and values. Thank you. What else did you hear at your tables with respect to why mission, vision, and values, and why is it helpful? What is it doing for you as you start thinking about strategic plan? Yes, back here. Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually probably going to say more than what I actually said at the table, but so at ATB, we have what's called the story. It's a 90-word story that basically encompasses why we're here and what we do for our customers and for our team members. So it's about creating happiness in our customers and making banking work for people. We also have our values in the 10 ATBs, and essentially both the story and the values are deeply, deeply embedded in every single team member's minds and hearts, even, I would say, right? So we all understand the importance of being able to collaborate with each other, the importance of innovation in the financial and fintech space, and transparency and things like that.
Okay. Yeah. So how is that helping you with your strategic, when you put together your HR strategic plan? What's the link there? What's the alignment?
Can I just say I'm just an HR advisor there?
You're an HR advisor.
I'm an HR advisor.
What do you think it is?
What I think it is?
Yeah.
Well, it's really just driving, I guess it's, in terms of decision making, it's really just driving the organization and the people into, like, what type of technology is going to engage our team members to ensuring they're doing the best possible work anywhere,
okay, all right?
Or what type of people do we need
exactly.
to bring on board, right?
Right.
People that buy into not only the story and the ATVs, but also the collaboration, the innovation.
Exactly. All of those things are, you need to keep top of mind as you put together your HR strategic plan. Otherwise, it won't be relevant, and it will not be given the time of day of your leaders in your organization. So that's why it's important. So thank you for sharing that. And here, take off your hat. It doesn't matter what position you have in the organization. Everybody has a voice today, and you know what? When it comes to planning and putting together your plan, I don't think it should be owned by it. It eventually is, somebody has to be accountable for actually moving it forward to the organization. But many people in the organization, as you put together your plan, should be accountable, right? From the, and when we do our planning, we involve all levels of the organization, right? So everybody should be involved and invested in putting into that plan. So I want you to think about that as well. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else with respect to the importance of the mission, vision, and values within their organization as they're putting together this strategic plan? Did you have an aha moment at your table that you'd like to share? Yes.
Question at the very beginning of the whole interview relating to see if they've actually checked out for mission and vision at least.
Okay.
And then when I'm looking for people, I'm also looking for alignment with our values as well.
That's right.
And then we've also included the values as part of our performance review as well.
Perfect. Perfect. So throughout everything you do from a people perspective, you're connecting, which is great. Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Okay, I'll just share a quick story with you. Back in the day when I wasn't consulting, I worked for an organization, and our mission was tomorrow's agronomic services today. That was the mission of our organization. And so as the VP of HR for that organization, what that told me from a people perspective, we had to be innovative. We had to hire best in class because we had to be future thinking, right? So every program, every process that we had to put in place for that organization had to be best in class. Otherwise, we would never meet our mandate of providing tomorrow's economic services today. So that's how we link, and everything that we did from a people perspective always had to be forward thinking, and that's how we drew that link. As today in our business, as we are working on our business plan for 2018, and as I said, we just had our meetings, our values are on our boardroom, right? And as we talked about some of the programs that we might do, because there's a zillion things that we could do, right? But we had to get focused. And somebody put it through an idea, and we talked it through, and then somebody looked at our values and said, I think we should take that off the table because it's not consistent with our values. Right on. Guess what? Out. And again, we were allowed to stay focused on what is it that we want to do because we want to stay true to our values. So all of those things are part of the process that you'll want to do as you put through your strategy, and don't underestimate the value of that part of the process. Don't rush it. So the next step in your process is that situational analysis. And what do you do in a situational analysis? And actually, I want to go back and say the analysis is threefold. It's your situational assessment, I'd like to suggest. It involves an environmental scan, a bigger picture, and then it's a more narrowed focus, which is the SWOT analysis. So I want to just take you through those very quickly, those three processes. And again, they're not rocket science. We can cover them off fairly quickly. The situational analysis, you've got a handout in your toolkit, in your folders, which is a tool that we like to use when we're in an organization to get a sense from the organization on how they perceive, particularly your management team, on what's working and what's not. So it's a bunch of questions. This is something that you can think about to say, would this be helpful as we do a situational analysis within our organization to say, from a management perspective, from our managers, I want to get their input, so how might I get that? So there's some questions there that you might want to look at. You'll do your environmental scan, and that, we call it the PEST, and that's looking at what's happening politically, what's happening in the economy, what's happening socially, and what's happening with technology that will impact our people programs. Remember, we're doing HR planning, so it's from a people perspective. If you were doing your business planning, your strategic planning, you would also do a PEST, but you would just do it at a different level, right? So you're applying the same process, but you're doing it from a people perspective. So politically, what's happening, economically, what's happening, socially, and technology, that is going to affect our people program. And then you're going to do a SWOT, and that's that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those are three processes within your analysis in that scanning that you're going to do prior to actually setting out and determining what are the goals that you want to set for yourself over the next 3 years that will become the sort of the meat and potatoes of your strategic plan. So I do want you to take a look at the situation analysis and just have a discussion at your table. Would this be a helpful tool when I'm doing my people planning? So again, take a few minutes, have a look at the situational analysis, discuss at your table how might you use this, how might you implement it, how might you change it to make it relevant to your organization. So have that chat. And you'll want to, again, refer to your workbook, because your workbook, the step 2, is your information gathering, your feedback. How would I do a situation analysis? How can I get that feedback from the organization on what's working and what's not? Because what we don't want to do in planning is for the HR people to set themselves in an office and say, I'm doing my planning, please do not disturb me. Like that doesn't work, right? That just doesn't work. We need to engage the organization in our planning. So might this be a tool to do that? So, and if not, what do you need to do to change it to make it a worthwhile tool? So have that chat, and then we'll share back in a couple of minutes. Okay, let's share. We're moving pretty fast today, but I'm terrified we'll run out of time if I don't keep us moving along. So we're going to share, and I know we probably could do a full day at this, which we have done in the past, but we have half a day. So we're going to get through it, and I think though sharing as a full group is important, because we hear different things. So what did you hear at your desk with respect to this stage in the process and doing a situation analysis? Would this be helpful, and or maybe you would want to do something different with respect to this, or maybe you'd want to customize this to get that situational analysis on what's happening. What did we hear? How about this table back here? What did you guys decide? Anything? Any aha moments with respect to the tool, and or what might you do to get that situation analysis?
One thing that I thought is it would be good to give this to managers, but also maybe a variation to employees.
Okay.
For instance, there's a question about the orientation process being effective. A manager could say, yeah, but then what would the onboarded employees?
Right. Okay. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Good. So take it down even another notch and get some feedback from employees. And now with SurveyMonkey being accessible to us all, we can do surveys pretty easily and make them very non-intrusive. And many organizations will do surveys quite regularly. So if you're in your planning, let people know. And if you want to ask a few questions, get it out across SurveyMonkey and ask for input. But again, to the point that was made earlier, be careful what you ask and be prepared to respond, especially if you're going to take it down to the employee level, right? Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on the discussion? Yes.
That the situation and managers might be sharing things that won't change, which is what we were talking about earlier. So it's almost like a bit defeating to do the situational analysis when I kind of already know what the situation is, but I know that a lot of things may not change, so it's hard to build that into the strategy.
So what do you do when that's the case? You just not do your situation analysis?
Well, we talked about, having managers and having things sort of come up with real ideas. But again, it's like comes down to that, is there even ability to have that change? Because we've done sort of surveys with our staff before, and some really good ideas have come out of it. But then maybe there wasn't budget for it, or maybe there just wasn't, it just didn't get approved.
Yeah, and I hear you. And that's why I caution maybe taking it down to the staff level, right?
Right.
Because you've got to manage expectations.
Yeah.
Your managers, though, need to be doing their own planning in their own organizations, and they need to get it with respect to the process and what is the intent, right? So there's a bit of education there. But you raise a very good point. If there is no hope in heck of anything changing with respect to that, then be careful what you ask. The thing is, though, don't assume too much, though, right? once you go out and ask sometimes for feedback, and it's interesting sometimes what you hear, and it makes you think, is that really unattainable? Could we do it a different way, right? And that's why it is important to ask, but you do need to be clear on what is the intent of asking, right? And that's why I kind of like the idea of keeping it at a management level and make sure they understand what it is you're trying to do here. You're trying to break old paradigms and look for new ways of doing things, right? And by making the ask, sometimes you hear something different. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and you know, if that is part of your culture and you're trying to break that old paradigm and you don't want same old, one of the things you might want to do is do a focus group. If you're doing your HR planning, right, and bring in key people into your planning and ask them some questions where you know you're not going to get same old, right? So you might want to be selective on who you bring. You own you're doing the planning, right? You're trying to get ideas right. So you don't have to do everybody. You can just say, you know what, I wouldn't mind a bit of join them and just, you know, because you're trying to think outside the box, and it's hard to do that by yourself. Yeah. That's
right.
Yeah.
So when you go out and you survey and you gather data on some of these questions, our own mentality might be it'll never change.
Mm-hmm.
But if your data points to 80% something strong that needs to be changed, it's always interesting to me how the perspective will shift around the leadership table.
And that's so true, Janet. Yes. Data is powerful. You can take it to your leaders and look, 80% of our managers are saying this. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. Yes.
It was, of course, the stay interview, because why are people staying? You're going to get a lot more positive feedback during those versus when you're first polling the whole company. You're going to get the positive and the negative. But I do stay interviews, especially with staff who've been there. We have staff that have been there 27 years. Like, why are you still with our organization when there's so many other organizations you could go to?
Perfect.
So, and then when I'm doing my planning and when I'm doing even my full then staff surveys, I'm seeing kind of the feedback I'm getting in those stay interviews and rolling that down into the full staff questions and then into my planning.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Just in the situational analysis assessment, our situational assessment, what is missing is exactly that is, how are we retaining the right fit? And how do we, just asking that question to make sure that the people that are staying are the right people that we want to stay.
That's right, yeah.
And why are they staying?
I love stay interviews. Thank you for that. And stay interviews, like do them, people maybe that have stayed with you a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then your long-term employees too. Like do it at different intervals, right? And see what you're getting. I want to take this opportunity to talk about leading and lagging, because I think this is an opportunity where we got an example. So based on our conversation today on here, what if we heard might be a lagging measure? An exit interview, yeah. Turnover, those are all lagging, right? A score on this is a lagging indicator as well, right? That's lagging, that's the past, right? What's a leading measure? Let's get this on the microphone here, because I think to help us start understanding what's the difference between lagging and leading, because I think you need both measures in your plan, right? So I think this is a good opportunity. So who said an example of a leading?
I think one of the best examples of a leading would be the stay interview. And when I've used the stay interviews, it's always from the perspective of what will it take for you to continue to be here?
That's the key. What will it take? So for the future, we're looking out, right? So yes, the stay interview and getting that understanding of what will it take to keep you, right? And then setting up your measurement relative to your goal. So if your goal is retention of staff, then you've got a leading indicator there because you're now beginning to understand what is it going to take to keep them, right? Another example of a leading. Can anybody share?
The amount of employees that are taking education, that's a leading in terms of taking care of their.
Education is always a leading indicator. You're absolutely right. Education, a leading indicator. Another example of a leading. What about a future score? A future score that you're going to strive for if you're doing an engagement survey or a survey of your manager. That would be leading as well, right? You're aiming towards something in the future, right? So if your current score is, let's say you get a 3, and that's a lagging indicator, that's where you're at today, and a leading indicator may be, in a year that score is going to be 4 or 4.5 or 5, right? That's a leading indicator. Are you understanding the difference now between lagging and leading? Okay. And what I'd like you to think about is as you develop your plan, have both. Have leading and lagging indicators in your plan. So future focus and also what's happening today, which is the lagging. Okay, okay, we're going to move on, and can you see why I need a plan? My gosh, if I didn't have a plan, I'd never stay focused. I'd be all over the place. Let's talk about we're still doing our analysis. So we're going to do a situational analysis, and we're going to get input from within the organization. And then we're going to take a look out, right? And we're going to do our what we call our PAS. So we're going to say politically what's happening that will impact our people programs in the future. And you're looking 3 years out, okay? So it's longer term right now is what you're thinking. So what's happening politically with your government changes in legislation? What's happening with the economy, right? That's going to affect our people programs and processes that we need to pay attention to as we're planning, right? Socially, what's happening? And with respect to technology, what's happening? And that's what we call our PEST. And you basically, as I said, in order to do this properly, it can't be just you sitting around the table in your office or at your desk. Engage others to help you do this analysis. So as I said, when we did it, we included the partners, we included our senior consultants, and we included our marketing team. That's what we did when we did our test. And as I said, we just did it, early January. We actually just did it. And so we sort of got a cross section, and we just put a flip chart up and just said, don't worry, there's no right or wrong answers. Just tell us what you're thinking. And we put it up, right? And then we sort of narrowed it and saying, okay, is that really important to us as we're thinking about our future in the next 3 years? And sort of narrowed it down to say what is important and what's not. And do that brainstorming. It's really, and if you have enough time, what I like to do is do that brainstorming and then get whoever you're asking to help out in that process, go up and put dots on the top 3 or 4. And that helps you narrow, right? So that's another process that you can use as you're doing your path. So before we go, can we very quickly, and I think we'll take the time, just sit at your table and say, give an example of a political that could impact your people program. Talk about an example of economic, social, and technology. Just have that quick, so we start to get it. And again, from a people perspective, right? Okay, so what's politically happening, what's happening in the economy, socially, and technology, that will affect your people planning. Have that quick conversation, and then we'll share. Okay, so can I just hear from what you were hearing as important things that will impact your people plan from a PEP perspective? What did you hear at your table? So if you're thinking 3 years out and you're looking at political, economic, social, technology, what are things you are definitely want to keep on the radar? What did you think? What did you hear?
spectrum. Because Giselle is from food bank and I'm from a mental health agency, and we have the young population as a majority and female population in our agency, and they have the older population. So it was like, when we talked about things like technology, it's like the older people have a hard time wanting to change or learn it, and we have so many young people, and they're on their phones, and
they want to embrace it,
and they want to embrace it, and us to get with it, us. So, so that's what I found in our conversation.
So if you were thinking of your people plan, what do you need to pay attention to?
Total opposite. We're paying attention to how we're recruiting, who we're recruiting, and how, for us, it's like we have a lot of team leaders now that are looking over other staff, and they're so young and without experience. They have education, but not experience. So, and learning soft skills, like how to manage people, is not, like Giselle said, they need time in the saddle to
Right. So if you're
that.
thinking of your people planning, you'll be wanting to look at the people that you're bringing in, the younger people, right, and helping them as they grow over the next 3 years on education at a different level than maybe your team leads. But education is going to be important, right, with respect to technology, how you use it, how you communicate, and all of that, so people understand and learn, right? And so that's important to think about then too, when you're thinking of your strategy. What do I need over the next 3 years in order to address that issue as it relates to technology? Okay, great. Thank you. Another example. Yes. Yes. Sorry, at the back here. Yes.
One thing that's really at the top of my mind, particularly at ATB, is the impact of automation in the next few years. And so, I mean, it's on the top of my mind, but obviously the top of the minds of everyone else at ATB. So we're constantly talking about what that's going to look like, how we're going to be upskilling or reskilling any current staff that are likely to be impacted. I mean, if we've got over 50% or more of our processes that can be automated, that's a lot of like 5,000 team members that can be affected by that.
Right. So you're going to want to star that when you're doing your PES as something you can't not pay attention to in the next 3 years. So that will, when you do your PES, and I'm going to suggest that as you do your PES, you come out with 3 or 4 things that I need to pay attention to as we move forward with our plan. So somewhere in our plan, we've got to see that, right? Okay, all right. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to start working the SWOT analysis. We're going to just take a 10-minute break. Before we go on break, though, I want to refer you back, though, to your work plan, because the idea is that you're working this work plan, so when you go back to your office, you've got the beginnings of your strategic planning. So we're now on step 2, we're information gathering. We've talked about the situation assessment, what your managers are saying, or anybody you want to bring into that discussion to get a good sense on what's happening in the organization today. And so think in terms of what are your managers saying, and then also what are your employees saying in employee surveys or things like that as well. So that would be part of your situation analysis too. I do want to mention, which I didn't mention when we were talking about the situational analysis, we love HR assessments, right? So an HR assessment is looking at your policies, your procedures, from a legislative and best practices perspective, right? So that's part of your situation analysis as well, right? So if you're not up on what that would look like, educate yourselves, right? There is a process to do an assessment, and that's an important part of your situational analysis. So when we go into our session later this morning, you're going to have time to reflect back a little bit, hopefully, if we've got time. So you might want to have some dialogue at your table on how do you do an HR assessment within your organization to make sure that you're compliant, especially with Bill 17 now, right? And so when we talked about the PES, right, politically, that's could be a risk for your organization, right? We've got new legislation introduced And so your assessment through your situational analysis is really, really important. You need to know whether you're compliant or whether you're not, right? So that's an important step also in your situation analysis. And hopefully when we come back after break, some of that will come out as you do your SWOT analysis. And we're going to talk a little bit about what a SWOT analysis looks like, because that's also an important piece of your assessment analysis before you even start thinking about what are your goals and your 3-year in your plan. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back at 10:30. Okay. We're going to move forward now, and we're still talking analysis. And part of your analysis, I would like to suggest, is a SWOT analysis, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you know, you're in a really awesome spot to do your SWOT analysis if you've done your situation analysis and got feedback within your organization. If you've done your PEF, now's a good time to do your SWOT, right? It just is looking at your environment in a different lens, right? So I like to do the SWOT at this particular time and in the process. So the strengths, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and strengths. And strengths is things within your organization. And again, from a people perspective, you're doing your SWOT from a people perspective that needs to be maintained, built upon, or leveraged, right? So you need to sort of move that forward if you've identified some strengths. And you're also seeing some common themes. What is your inside your organization saying? What is your PEF saying? And then if you've got a strength, build on that, right? And so that's why everything needs to be linked and aligned. Your weaknesses are things that, you know, you really, within your organization, you can control. You've got control over it, again, from a people perspective. And they need to be remedied, changed, or stopped, right? So the culture one, who was it that was asking about culture? Right. So here, start thinking about the culture, right? It's within your organization. Yes, you do have control over that. So what do you need to be doing in order to remedy, change, do things differently in the next 3 years? Your opportunities is sort of, it's outward. I would like to suggest it's outwardly focused, similar to the past, but just through a different lens. And the opportunities you need to be prioritizing, capturing, and building upon. And you'll get glimmers of those through the past, right? Because it's outwardly thinking. But and then also your threats then is, I'd like to suggest, is outwardly focused as well. Get some tips, ideas on what that might be through your pest assignment or pest process. And your threats need to be countered or minimized or managed. And because they're external to your organization, you don't always have control over them, right? But you still need to be paying attention to them, right? The thing is with your SWOT analysis, don't get hung up on whether it's your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? Put up a flip chart and say, these are our strengths and opportunities, these are our weaknesses and threats. And just do the brain dump, right? Don't say, oh, is that a strength or is that a weakness? Is this an opportunity? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, right? Just get it down, do that brain dump, and do it with your organization. And I like the idea of like, put your flip charts up and put strengths, threats, weaknesses, and opportunities, and then just do your brain dump. And then again, if you're trying to narrow it and you're doing it, you're inviting other people into that process with you, right? Do the same as you would do with your PEF, is get it narrowed down then and give your people that are participating 4 or 5 dots and say, or 3 or 4 dots, or how many, whatever it'll depend on how extensive you're doing your SWOT. If you've got pages and pages on your wall of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, give your participants 4 or 5 or 6 maybe even, dots, and say, what are the most important things that you think that we need to be paying attention to from a people perspective? Because you're trying to narrow the most important items that you need to put into strategic plan. Any questions on the SWOT and the process? So we're doing, and so when you do your SWOT, I'd like you to suggest to start bringing everything together, right? So you'll bring the environmental scan, the situational assessment, exit interviews, HR assessments, bring all of those things to the table as you do your SWOT, right? So you're thinking as broadly and as comprehensively as you can. Does anybody have any questions on any of the items that you see here as to how you might do that? We good? All right. How many people do, I've heard a lot into employee search. I'm just curious on the HR assessment. Do people do that within their organization, and do you have a process to do that?
That are like all of the forms, all of the documents. So there is a set sort of standard timeline,
Okay.
but I don't know how full it's covering a full HR assessment.
Right. Okay. This year, if you're doing your HR, so thank you for that. This year, I'd like to encourage you that if you're doing your HR assessment, one thing, of course, you need to pay attention to is the new legislation, right? So one easy way to do your assessment relative to the legislation is on the website, on the government website, you've got all of the changes. And a simple thing is just to, what are the changes and what is our policies and procedures saying today? That is a very quick assessment relative to your policies and procedures, right? And if you're wondering, and although that's not a complete robust assessment, at least it's a beginning, and it's an important beginning this year, right? So just make sure you're paying attention to that because of the changes. And if you want more information on HR assessments and a process to do that, come speak to me after, because we do a lot of assessments. So I can talk to you a little bit about what that process might look like. So I do have a slide which I forgot. I do have a slide that talks to when we do assessments, we cover off of these and a number of other items. But this year in particular, these are some of the things that you'll be wanting to pay attention to when you're doing your HR assessment, to say, what, if anything, do we need to be looking at, and you need to build that into your plan. I would say you need to build that into your business plan for this year, right, from a people perspective, right? You're going to do planning at two levels. You're doing your strategic plan, which is 3 years out, and you're doing an operational plan for this year to start shifting and moving you towards your strategic goals. This is work that needs to be done this year. Yeah. Yes. And because of Bill 17. Yeah. There is a few on here that I've added that are not directly related to Bill 17, and that's your employee file and record keeping. That's a risk for many of us with respect to privacy and things like that. So if you're doing an HR assessment, you need to know what you can and can't keep on file, how long you can keep it on file. So when you do an HR assessment, you need to be looking at things like that. So that one isn't necessarily Bill 17. And statement of earnings isn't either, but mostly the other ones are Bill 17. Health and safety, there's been some changes though, right? So that's not Bill 17, but you need to know from an assessment point of view, what are the changes and are you compliant and what that's looking like? And if you don't know, then build that into your plan for 2018, right? So it's interesting. One of the things you're going to do, and as I said, your planning is at two levels. It's at a longer term and then it's a shorter term, right? So you've got your 3 years. I'd like to suggest you do a 3-year strategic plan that has some very broad strategic goals, and then you have an operational people plan for your year in hand, right? So where this might fit in, for example, if you've got a 3-year strategic plan that says we're going to have a goal around attraction and retention, right? That might be a longer term goal, and an objective under that is to make sure that your policies and procedures are up to date so you can attract and retain the right people. So you can sort of see where your strategic goals, your more operational people goals fit with your strategic goals, because you're going to be doing planning at 2 levels. Does everybody get that? The planning, the sort of different levels of planning that you do? Okay. And we're going to work through that through if you follow your workbooks, you'll see that there's sort of that 2 levels of planning that you do. Okay, we're going to talk now about the scorecard. So how many understand, how many know about a scorecard? Any show of hands? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to talk in general terms about the scorecard and keep it simple. So for me, when I think of the scorecard, what it does for me in the planning processes is ensures that I'm covering off all aspects of either my business or my people plan. And when I'm saying all aspects, all coordinates, all corners. And corners for me include financial, client, internal business processes, learning and culture. So when I'm planning, if I'm not planning for all 4 coordinates, I don't have a robust plan. So what the scorecard does for me is ensures that when I'm planning, I pay attention to the whole picture and I develop goals and metrics in all 4 corners. So I'm going to have a goal that's financial. I'm going to have metrics that are financial. I'm going to have a goal that's client focused and metrics that are client focused. I'm going to have a goal that addresses internal processes and metrics that address internal processes. And I'm going to have a goal that addresses learning, culture, and innovation. And I'm going to have metrics that do that. So this scorecard ensures, and sometimes I like to call it the balanced scorecard, because it ensures that I'm addressing all areas either of the business and or of our people, programs, and processes. It's that simple. So, but I say it's that simple because I've been familiar with the scorecard for a long time. It may not be that simple for you guys. So what questions do you have about the scorecard as I've described it right now? Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Okay, no, I'm just saying, like, are you saying this is your focus?
No.
Or you're saying in general,
everybody,
okay.
If they want to have a balanced scorecard, every organization should be thinking about having a goal that addresses some financial aspects, should have a goal that is client focused, should have a goal that addresses internal business processes, and should have a goal that's learning, growth, and innovative if you want a balanced scorecard approach to your strategic plan. Now, it's going to look, where it's going to look different, though, is the level of planning you're doing in your organization. So I'd like to suggest even your organizational strategy, if you're going with a balanced scorecard, they will have those 4 coordinates. They will look different than your HR, right? But you still, if you want that balanced approach to your strategy, encourage yourself and be disciplined to say, as I call out my strategic goals, is there a financial goal in there? And what might that look like from a people perspective? So that's what we have to talk about, right? How can I develop, and is it important to develop a people goal that has a financial aspect to it? So we need to have that conversation because it's got to be relevant, right? What might a client goal look like from a people perspective? What might a goal relative internal processes look like from a people perspective and from a learning and growth initiative? This one's easy from a people perspective, right? This one's harder though, the financial, right? And what about clients? From a people perspective, can we put together a goal that's client focused? Can we? I'm seeing yes. What would that look like? Anybody want to offer up a suggestion? What might a goal from a people perspective that's client focused look like? Yep.
We do, again, surveys. So we do survey our clients and find out where they're at. So could it be how happy the clients are with their interactions with our staff?
That could be, yeah. Or how satisfied are they getting the results? Yeah. That could be a client focused goal, definitely. What might be another one? Janet.
I think in a lot of organizations, HR is a business partner, and so dealing with your business partners as to what their needs are, and then being able to address their needs in a timely manner, with good service, getting the end result that they need.
Bang on. So when you're thinking about your people program, like your people strategy, right? Your clients are could be your departments that you're working with, your business partners, right? Not so much your external stakeholders, although it could be that as well. But define and talk about who is my client when I'm building my people program. It could be your managers, right? It could be your employees. Who is your client? And build a goal and a strategy relative to that stakeholder, right? If you're wanting to get that balanced approach to your strategy. That's what the balanced scorecard is. Not everybody uses the balanced scorecard, to be quite honest, because they can't find relevant goals in each of the quadrants. And you know what? That's okay, but I like the discipline of challenging yourself to do it, right? And the thing is, you're going to come up with strategic goals after having done your environmental scan, your situation, right? And so this is just another lens that you're applying to your planning to say, I need to think about this. I've thought about my situation, my SWOT, my task. I've got my 3 or 4 in each of those, and now I'm going to look at it from a balanced perspective so that I'm not just looking at one aspect of what we do from a people perspective. We're broadening it. This gives you the discipline to look at it very broad. Okay, what might be a financial goal that an organization might set relative to their people programs and processes? Yeah. Reduce sick time. Reduce sick time, yes. So if you've done your SWOT analysis, you're saying, and you know what, you're seeing that sick time is an issue for your organization, you develop a goal around that. That is a financial goal. Exactly. And you're going to put some measures in place. Yeah. That's a really good example of a financial goal that you'll want to you'll want to address. What's another one? Yes.
Remain competitive with compensation.
Compensation, definitely. Yes, could be another one. That's financial. Let's talk about internal business processes. What might be a goal that is relative to internal business processes?
The onboarding process.
The onboarding, okay. Yeah, your onboarding, exactly. Yep. Orientation, yeah. Any process that you have could be performance management, right? Another one that's process oriented. So think in terms of what people, programs, and processes you have. So onboarding, recruitment, training and development. You could have processes. Your HRIS system might be a process, right? That you'll have determined from your situational assessment that is something I have to address. That would be an example of internal, right? And then what about learning, growth, and opportunity in innovation? What would be an example there? Education, right?
I think also one of the challenges is having staff staying up to date on the HR policies. It's one of those things that seems to be there, but nobody really reads.
Right. Sort of like that manual that sits on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
right.
A goal would be to have 100% engagement within staff, either tracking that through some type of payroll HR system,
right.
or with that kind of education.
And that is what probably is a very good one for this year, because everybody's looking at their policies and procedures, and the last thing that you want is to invest in updating all your policies and procedures, and nobody refers to them, right? So that would be a great one for 2018. And with respect to, that would also be a leading measure, right? Because you're going to measure where do you want to get to, right? And then you're going to go out and measure it at the end, right? So that's another indicator of a leading measure that you would do relative to that. So when I say this is fairly straightforward, it's fairly straightforward in the idea of what do I need to do. I need to think in terms of financial goal. I need to think in terms of a client goal. I need to think in terms of an internal process goal, and I need to think about learning and development. That is the easy part, right? And that is the balanced scorecard. What the hard lifting is to come up with those goals that are relevant, make sense, and then, so I really encourage you, by doing your situation analysis, that analysis first, that will direct you to say, okay, what do I need to be doing? Because you're going to link these, you're going to think in terms of these relative to what your analysis told you in that second step, right? But this is the heavy lifting that goes with your strategic planning. Without a doubt, thinking of these that are relevant, meaningful, is hard. And that's why don't do it yourself. That's why you need to get help when you're putting together your strategic plan, because you need to think outside the box, you need to think differently, and you can do that by bringing people into the process and helping you with that. So, we've already talked about this. Okay. So before we go on, are there any questions on the scorecard, the balanced scorecard? I was a little bit surprised that there weren't more hands up when I said, does anybody know the balanced scorecard? So that was a bit of a surprise. So I think I need to slow down a bit and make sure that everybody understands the balanced scorecard. Yes?
Scorecard has probably been around since the 80s.
Right? It has.
And I think it's probably manifested itself in a couple of different ways. So although we don't do it in that format, those aspects are absolutely part of the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it has been around a long time. You're absolutely right. And maybe it's not referred to the balanced scorecard anymore, right? Yeah, right. Because I truly believe, so this week so I'm at this stage now with respect to the Salopec and Associates planning process. So this week I'm going to be looking at all the analysis that we got from the team, right? And I'm going to be pulling back, and I'm going to be doing it with my partner. And we're going to be sitting back and we're going to say, okay, based on what we heard, what do we want to set for goals we're setting goals for 3 years out and then also for this year. And we will make sure that we've got those 4 quadrants covered off, right? So we'll make sure that we've got financial, client, process, and learning and development as a goal, right? Because I just know that that will position us well and be well-rounded in respect to what we try to achieve over the next 3 years, and in particular in 2018. Yes. I would love to suggest you would do that. Yes, exactly. It's a very good process to do. I think every department should do a balanced scorecard when they're setting their goals, or think in terms of a balanced scorecard, you know. The thing is, though, too, you might go through the discipline of thinking about scorecard and go, I really can't think of a learning and development tool, but I'm thinking, gosh, you must probably would be pretty hard pressed if you can't, with the way the extent of our change happening, right? So I think most departments would be able to think about a goal that fits each of those quadrants. Yeah. Any other questions on it? Yes. Who would like to give another example of financial goals? I think it's a very good question. Pardon? We're choosing overtime, right? Yeah. So right now, a big one will be the overtime and the lead time and how you manage that, right? Because that's going to hit the pocketbook, the bottom line, yeah, and the bottom line, yeah. Compensation's another. We already talked about compensation. So actually, the financial one, when you think about it, is actually easier than we might initially think, right? When we think in terms of that, reducing your turnover is an issue, right? But it has to be an issue, right? Turnover needs to be an issue, because you can relate that to a financial goal as well. Yeah.
And rehiring, retraining, and that would be another financial goal.
Yeah, and you know what I like about that one is that it's long-term thinking too. It's not something because that's what you got to do. Remember, you're planning at 2 levels, right? You're doing the strategic HR plan, and then you're doing your operational plan. So make your strategic goals robust enough that it's something that you're going to address in the next 3 years, not just this year. Janet, did you have something? The typical, sorry, can you say that? Can we get the microphone on that? Okay.
So research over the years has shown that the typical cost of turnover is 2.5 times annual salary.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah.
That benchmark is, and then to reduce that.
Yeah, that's right. That's a really good benchmark right there, though, right? So, because what you do, if you're going to do measurements, you need a benchmark, right? And so that is, right there, you've got a goal and you got a measure, right? So, thank you for that, Janet. Are we good with the financial? Okay. And again, think in terms of leading and lagging. So if you're setting a strategic goal that over the 3 years, you're not only going to address turnover, but you're also going to, when you hire, do things differently and calling out what that is, right? That's a robust strategic goal, right? And so then for each goal, you're going to have, I'd like to suggest 3 measures to say, am I landing it? Am I doing it? So you can revisit every year. So again, have a combination of leading and lagging to say, am I reaching that goal? Am I doing that? That's the measurement piece that comes into it. And we're getting a little bit ahead of our time, but I also think that let's have the conversation when the topic comes up. So we're good. So once you've thought about your balanced scorecard and whether or not those 4 quadrants might have some relevance to your people program and processes in the next 3 years. What you're going to do now then is you're going to say, okay, I need to nail it now. I got to sit back, reflect on everything and say, what will I set as our strategic goals for the next 3 years? So you want those to be a lofty challenge, right? Something that you'll work at year after year after year for the next 3 years. And to the extent you can, you want them to be measurable. So you're going to want to think in terms of measurements that you can put in under those to help you determine whether or not you're moving forward. And long term. So I've got an example here. A strategic goal example might be to be an employer of choice. We hear that a lot. We go in and an organization says, you know what, our strategic goal is to be an employer of choice. Well, that is a lofty, long-term strategic goal from a people perspective because you don't become employer of choice in a year. It's a bit of a process. And it's going to take you a number of years. So you have to go on a journey, right? So that's a good strategic goal. It's, probably 3 years out. And underneath that goal, you're going to be able to put some objectives and some measures in place to say, are we achieving it, right? You might want to say as a strategic goal, if turnover is a problem, you might want to put a lofty goal in there with respect to turnover. To say what that's going to look like, and you don't just automatically reduce turnover. You've got to do some things, right? So that's another, goal that you might want to put out there, and you can also build some good leading measures to say, are you actually arriving on that? You want to maximize employee performance and development. Again, that's not something you do in year 1. You're going to have to go on a bit of a journey to get there, right? So it's bigger than 1 year, and it could take 3 years to land on that. Recognizing reward employees fairly and at a competitive level. That's not something that you typically do in year 1, but it is something that you could realistically accomplish over a 3-year period. Communicate effectively our people programs and processes. And what does that look like over a period of time, and what can you measure in order to determine whether or not you've got there? So some examples of strategic goals. And for each strategic goal, so I'd like to say when you do your people planning, you would have 4 or 5 strategic goals. If you have more than 4 or 5, you're trying to probably do too much. So I would limit it to 4 or 5, and that's the same with whether you're doing strategic planning at a people level, at a finance level, or at an organizational level. 4 or 5 lofty goals to challenge yourself over the next 3 years is plenty. Try to do too much and you don't tend to accomplish anything. So 4 or 5, as I said, strategic goals. If you have 4, what does that allow you to do? 1 per quadrant, exactly. If you're looking at the balanced scorecard, right? So that's why 4 sometimes fits nicely, because you can sort of address each of your quadrants if you're working on the balanced scorecard. So thank you for that. And for each strategic goal, the next step is that you're going to identify objectives, timelines, key performance indicators, accountability, and resources required. So refer to your handbook, your working book now, and because we're going to actually do a little bit of work on this, so you can start actually saying, what does this look and feel like as I do this exercise? So step 3 is you're going to identify those strategic goals. You're going to go into your groups in a little bit. And I want you to start thinking in terms of your organization, what might be 4 goals that we might want to set, and use your table, use your group to sort of run ideas by, especially if you're trying to align with a balanced scorecard. What might be the 4 goals that you set? And then we're going to actually, after that, drill down and spend some time to say, based on my goal, what would be an objective relative to that goal that I would want to pay attention to in 2018? So this planning here is more at a year-by-year basis. So I know where I want to go in 3 years. What do I need to do this year with respect to an objective, a timeline? What would be my KPI? What's a KPI? Key performance indicator, right? That's your measure. How am I going to measure it? And who's accountable for that? And do I need any resources? This ensures that you have a plan to move your strategy forward. And this part of the plan tends to be your annual business plan then, right? And that's going to talk about what do I need to do this year in order to make some groundwork in order to land my strategy. So we're going to talk in terms of those components of the plan. So this is where the key performance indicators, where we start talking about those metrics and those analytics, which we've already talked about throughout the morning. And that's your measurable that demonstrates, whether or not you're on target. And we've already talked about we want a bit of a mix, right, between leading and lagging indicators. So for every every objective, you would want to have maybe 2 or maybe even 3 measures, right? Sometimes it's hard to get 3, right? But strive to at least to get 2 measures. This is an example. So in this particular example, I'm measuring turnover. I'm measuring turnover, absenteeism, total compensation costs, and training and development. And so what I'm trying to show in this is some metrics or some analyticals that you could pull off and put into your plan that would allow you to benchmark and to measure your organization by. And actually, you can get some of these measures through different surveys. You can actually get some of these from the Poland survey. Right, Tracy? Yeah. So if you're wondering, where do I get a benchmark for turnover and things like that, think in terms of the Bowling survey, because it is, and some of these others as well, because it is good. And if you're going to get serious about metrics and analytics, you're going to have to figure out, where do I get my benchmark, right? What is that benchmark? Although having said, so you look to surveys. You can look to the Bowling survey. Where, if you don't have access to surveys though, where else will you look for your benchmark? Pardon? That's right, your own historical data. That's the other place where you can benchmark. And that's why I like to say, I like a couple, right though? Like benchmark against the external, but also benchmark against your internal, right? And so I kind of like 2 perspectives, right? When I'm trying to find measures and metrics. So this slide shows you a benchmarking exercise that says strategically, organizational turnover is an issue for us, right? What am I going to measure to see whether or not we're making inroads with respect to turnover and how bad actually is our turnover relative to other organizations within our sector, right? So the benchmark is 12, and I don't know where these numbers are, they're just numbers, right? But you would actually go in and you say, okay, what is the benchmark? You might find by looking at a survey that the benchmark is 12.9, and you're experiencing 10.2. So your gap is the difference, right? And that's what you're trying to address. The same with absenteeism, right? So what's the benchmark? And these are all in the Bolin survey. So you can easily pull these off of that particular survey. And you can also measure them as a lagging measure within your own organization, and then create a leading measure to say, where do I want to get to, right? So you're thinking in terms of lagging to set your benchmark and leading to set your target as to how you want to grow and change, right? So in this particular organization, they've come up with a benchmark of 7.4. I'm not sure whether they got that off of a survey or whether that's an internal measure within their organization. But actually, in this case, it has to be, in this case here, this has to have come from a survey because they're actually at 9.2. So 9.2 is a lagging indicator. So they've gotten this benchmark of 7.4 from an external source. And so the gap is the gap is between the 9.2 and the 7.4. And the way they're measuring the absenteeism rate is sick time used. Yeah, they're measuring it in terms of sick time. Who else measures currently absenteeism right now? Okay, how are you measuring it? How are you setting your benchmark? And what are you doing relative to that metric?
We get it off our payroll system, and we look at the FTEs in the organization and the number of hours that they missed during the year, and we measure it mostly just against ourselves plus through Sun Life and what the averages are in the industry.
Okay, so you're getting it from your insurance company and your benchmark. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're measuring the FTE in your organization, and are you
number of sick days?
Number of sick days.
Yeah, and then we measure it from exempt and union staff, and we're actually doing quite well in that area.
Right. So if somebody hasn't it's run out of sick time and things like that, are you capturing that then or not? You are. Okay. All right. So define how you're measuring it, right? But if you're benchmarking it against the benchmark, you've got to be comparing apples with apples though, right? So that's important, right? So if you're getting your benchmark from your insurance company, make sure you're measuring it the same way that organization is measuring it, right? So if you're getting your statistics from your insurance company or from a survey, pay attention to how they are measuring it within that survey or within that organization, and measure yours exactly the same way, right? Otherwise, you're not comparing apples with apples. And Tracy, you can probably mention it. I would imagine in the Bolin survey, you define how you're measuring. Is that correct? It's what?
Our actual catchphrase is comparing apples to apples for 20 years.
Right.
So,
it is really, really important. If you're not comparing apples and apples, it's not a meaningful measure. It really isn't. And so, and you know what the thing is, I've worked enough with measures to know that there's really not a right and a wrong way always there is. But what there is a consistent way. So, don't get caught up as just the right or the wrong way, just be a consistent way. So that means if you're setting your benchmark internally, then be consistent year after year after year on how you're doing that, right? And if you're comparing it to a survey, be consistent with the way the survey is doing it. And just a side note, if you're thinking of HR information systems and moving to that too, and some of these measures are important, then think in terms of that when you're setting up your HRIS system, right? Because you've got to gather the data relative to the measures that are important to your plan, right? So think about that when you're gathering information and doing that, because you want to set it up correctly. So another example here is the cost of labor as a percentage of your budget, and that's how they're measuring total compensation costs. we already talked about setting a strategic goal relative to compensation and how you reward your people. So this truly could be a strategic goal that you set in the long term, and then you're going to measure it every year. And again, this is a benchmark that you can determine internally or get off a survey, and then measure it actually, what's the gap, and then what are you going to do to close that gap? And those become your objectives. And another example then was also training and development. Training and development cost is a percentage of budget, and the benchmark being 0.6, they're at 0.3, and if this is an important measure, then you would want to say, okay, how do I close that gap? I do want to caution us, metrics and analytics and measuring is really, really important, but it's not the only thing, right? It's not the only thing. And that's why I think for every strategic goal or objective that we set for ourselves, that's why I encourage you to have at least three indicators. Maybe two of them are financial and one may not be a financial indicator as to how are you doing relative to that. Because it's just not all about the numbers, right? And so you might want to have two hard measures, and then maybe a soft measure, right? With respect to how are you doing relative to that. And think in terms of in that as well, because metrics and analytics are important, but sometimes they don't always tell you the whole story, right? So any questions on this? We're going fast on this, but I want you time at your tables to also work your workbook. Yes? Definitely. That's so important. And if you're doing a 3-year strategic plan, you need to be reflecting on that, right? Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. Okay, any other questions on this component? Good. I have to say, this too is also the heavy lifting that you do, you develop your strategic plan. So what we've learned to do in our strategic planning is that we don't do it all in one season, right? So you're exhausted. This is hard work, right? So we tend to break it down into 2 or 3 hour working sessions, right? So you go at it for 2 or 3 hours, then you reflect, and then maybe the next week you come back and you do another meeting, right? Because this is hard work. So before you used to see, and you still do see a lot of organizations that will go away for 2-day planning sessions, but we found the most effective ones is when you do it in smaller, bite-sized pieces. You tend to get a better product because by the end of the second day, you're completely exhausted. And guess what comes at the end of the second day? This work. Yeah, celebration, yeah, celebration. But this is the work that also comes usually at the second, towards the end of your strategy session, and just tired, right? So breaking it up into smaller working sessions, I find gets you a better plan. And again, when you're thinking of those KPIs, really what is a KPI? I like to think it's a stake in the ground and something that you strive or something that you strive towards. That's the lagging and the leading, right? And think in terms of, so when you're thinking of those KPIs, we spent a slide now talking about financial, but it also could be a date of completion, right? So if you're working towards something, I need to complete it or I want that done by a certain date. That could be a KPI, right? It could be you want approval of senior management, right? Of a particular program or process that you're rolling out, right? So you want to get it approved. That also could be a KPI. Or a KPI could be a score in a survey, right? And that's why I'm saying do a number of KPIs so that you've got different indicators as to whether or not you're landing or moving forward. And this is just an example of some KPIs relative to an objective. So in this example, the strategic goal might be, we want to become employer of choice in the next 3 years, right? So an objective might be research what becoming an employer of choice entails. Like you're not going to become employer of choice unless you figure out what that entails, right? So set an objective this year for figuring out what that is. And a KPI for that might be the criteria is defined and the concept is endorsed by managers by April of 2018. So that's how you start moving that goal forward, right? Another objective under that is establish your benchmarks. If you're going to be an employer, your goal is to be that employer of choice for 3 years. 3 years, what are going to be your benchmarks, right? So for this year, determine what are the benchmarks. It might be an employee engagement developed and administered by December of 2006 and scores recorded. So that might be a KPI that you'll set for yourself in order to do that. And another objective for 2018, if this is a 3-year journey, might be identify the gaps and develop the plan. Plan approved by senior management April 2019. Because what we know for sure, if you're trying to be an employer of choice, this is something that not even the HR department can do themselves. This is an initiative that the whole organization needs to endorse, right from senior leaders right down to your management team, right? So if you don't put a KPI in there and getting engagement and endorsement by leaders in the organization, I'd like to suggest you will not be successful. So put that in as a KPI and say, this is what that might look like, as an example. Okay, so we're going to go to, for the rest of the workshop, we're going to go into our workbooks, and we're going to start working through the work plan. We're not by any means going to complete this, but it's an opportunity for you to sit at your table as you're working through it and start talking about the important aspects of your plan and learning from each other. So what I'd like you to do is, I think where we got to with respect to discussion in your work plan, we had some feedback on the situational assessment. We had some discussion what employees said in employee survey stay interviews. But if you've got questions that you're not sure what that looks like and may feel like within your organization, and you have somebody sitting at your table, ask them. And again, we talked a little bit about HR assessment, but if you've got questions and you're wondering about that HR assessment, talk it over with your people as you work through this planning document for the next half hour. I really would like, before you leave in the next half hour though, is to have given some thoughts based on the discussion we've had today on what might be at least 2 strategic goals to start you thinking in terms of what that might look and feel like. And again, thinking about the balanced scorecard. So I'd like you to have that conversation at your table. Talk about the balanced scorecard and what might that look like for a strategic goal for your organization. And have some of that filled in before you leave in the next half hour. And then start, hopefully, even if you take one strategic goal, work through this exercise here. So you start to get the look and feel of what this is going to maybe look like when you take it back to your leadership group and continue to work it at your operational level. So hopefully we can at least accomplish that in the next half hour. Think about some strategic goals and at least do one objective here that will get you thinking about what is the look and feel of that. And then I'm going to check in with you in about 10, 15 minutes, see how you're doing. Before we leave at 12, I do want to say what's this looking like as you go back to your organization and try to move it forward. That's only a couple of slides, so we can take the most of the time in the next half hour to start working the workbook. So are we all good with that? Okay, all right, and I'll just rotate around, and if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me. I hope you had good conversation at your table. I hope you had some food for thought that will help you move your plan as you leave here and continue to develop your plan back at the office. Before we go on to how do you do that, how do you move it forward, I just wanted to go back here to say, did we cover off what it is that you wanted to learn from the session? I think we had some good conversation on leading and lagging measures. Unless there's a burning question, I'll say I think that's a check. We covered off on that. Are we good? Yes? Okay. Okay, so this one I don't think we really talked about all that much. So I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes on strategy for improving your culture. When we talk about developing an HR strategic plan and we've got a culture issue, what is it that's going to be important in moving forward with that strategy? What employees want, that's That definitely could be a factor. What else? Yep. And what do you need to do in order to determine that? Exactly. What is it that the organization wants as far as the culture, right? So if you want to make a shift here in the strategy, go back to your guiding principles. I love that. And determine what is the value proposition. We've heard that name before, right? What's the value proposition that this organization stands for, right? And that is the culture that hopefully, that you're moving towards. So if you're trying to develop a strategy here, one of the first things you need to do as an objective is clearly define what it is you're trying to do, right? So you've got to define that. So if your lofty strategy is to address the culture in the organization and objective, your first objective is define what that is and make sure you understand it, right? Because that's going to be critical and key in every aspect of your people, programs, and processes. It's going to impact who you bring in, how you recruit, how you train, how you develop, right? So you need to step back and define that as the first objective in your strategy, right? And a measurable for that could be as simple as if that's your goal for this year, is that your objective for this year, is to define it. Your very first measurable might be by April, the senior management team have got around the table and have endorsed it and said, yeah, that's what we're all about. That could be your first measure, right? So hopefully if that is something that you're trying to address, then that will give you some food for thought as to what might be some of the objectives and the measurables relative to that goal. This one we didn't talk about either, and I think we need to talk about this. Realizing stretch goals when the unexpected happens. How many times does that happen? All the time. All the time. So what do we do about that? We've learned this morning that if you're going to do strategic planning, call out 4, most 5 strategic goals, right? Those lofty goals over the next 3 years that you're going to land. And then every year you're going to develop objectives and measures to shift you and move you, right? So all of a sudden, something out of the blue comes and you look at your strategic goals, well, that doesn't even fit in one of my quadrants, right? So what do you do? Or say, how can I fit this into one of my quadrants? Yeah, you can do that. Yes, you can make another objective. But guess what happens when you start doing that? All of a sudden you've got 10 things that are really, really important and nothing gets done, right? That's the problem with that. Well, I'll just add it to my to-do list, right? So that doesn't always work, right? So what do we do? That's right. And so what you have to do is keep your plan alive. It may be that one of your goals are going to get switched out for another one that obviously has become more important. But I really encourage you is don't react just to say, okay, because you put that goal in place after having done quite a thorough process. This was an important goal strategically that you're going to work on the 3 years. So I caution you to say, okay, that one's out, this one's in, right? Really think it through. Do the situational analysis. Do the SWOT. Is this really important to our organization? And if it is, then yes, you may have to switch something out. That's how you keep your plan alive. But I'd also like to suggest that when something unexpected happens, a lot of times it's short term, right? It's not the longer term, right? So have that discussion with yourself and maybe engage some of your folks that you had asked into the planning session to say, how important is this? How relevant is it? And does it fit within the longer term strategy? Because your long-term strategic goals, like those lofty ones that you put out for the next 3 or 4 years, shouldn't really shift every year, right? But maybe some of the objectives underneath them will shift, and that's your year-to-year priority, and maybe that's okay. So in having that dialogue And, I think I have really realized this in my own planning because our planning got delayed this year for our organization. And what I realized though, this still is important, right? And so what's going to happen is some of the measurables that we set for ourselves this year, guess what? I'm not going to land them because we got a late start, right? But guess what? That's okay. It's not about, God, I'm not going to make my measure. It's about I'm starting towards meeting the measure, right? And if we're setting stretch measures, stretch objectives, so what? You don't land it, but you did the very best you could do, right? So, just keeping that in context is really important when I think the unexpected happens, because it will happen. Our world changes. So have that dialogue with yourself as the ambassador of your plan, but also other people that come into your planning process. And we talked about the scorecard. So I think we're good in respect to some of those items. So just one slide here to talk about how we move the plan forward as we go back and leave. Oh, sorry. So moving the plan forward. And I think this is just reinforcement from what I've said before. Your plan is worthless unless it gets the attention of senior management and your management team, and they own it. And so we can't do it in isolation. So you need to make sure that you're getting that endorsement and you're getting that input. And the best way for anybody to own something is to ask them in for input, right? So as you leave here and you go back and you continue putting your plan together, ask for input, explain to your senior management what you've done today, share with them some of the learnings from the workshop, because guess what? This is practical at every level in the organization. As we mentioned, your finance department might want to do this exercise as well. Your volunteer services department might want to do this as well, right? So share your learnings and your findings. And provide a draft, and I always think that when we do our strategic plan and we've invited people in, don't stamp it as final, right? Put it out as a draft, ask for input, and keep it alive, right, as you're finalizing it. So, and ask for senior management to endorse and champion the plan. So what I'd like you to think about, in order to do that, in order to get that endorsement, who should be in this accountability column? Is that all you as the HR manager? No. Exactly. In that accountability should be some of your senior leaders in the organization. Go and ask them. Take ownership of that objective. Take ownership of that measure, and you will help them and you will engage them, but you don't have to own it all. So in that accountability, make sure that you don't have your name or your position throughout all that, or you're never gonna get it moved, and you're never gonna move it through your organization. Ask for help and make sure that you've got some of your senior leaders in the organization owning that objective, and you helping and engaging and facilitating as opposed to owning it. So hopefully that'll help you move it, and you won't feel, oh my gosh, I've got so much on my plate, because you've sort of shared the burden of responsibility. We're pretty much done. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to stay. And I also, you know who I am, and you've got my phone number. Feel free to give me a call at any time. But I will stay for a bit after if you've got any questions. And thank you. I really enjoy these sessions. I enjoy the engagement and the level of sharing that you do. I always come away from these sessions learning a lot. So thank you for sharing your perspective. And have a great afternoon.